But I wanted to start off with a correction. Last week, during a phone call, somebody had brought up whether or not something was the null hypothesis, and I went off on a little rant that the null hypothesis, by definition, can't be falsified. I don't know why my brain did that. Trust me, I do. Not only do I have an understanding of the null hypothesis, but I've lectured on it, and I used it extensively in the debate that I did yesterday against Mike Licona. But some people emailed in and said, "What's wrong with you?" And I don't know what's wrong with me. The truth is, the null hypothesis in inferential statistics is essentially not something that can't be falsified, but something that can't be proven. Falsifying the null hypothesis is exactly how we go about establishing that a new hypothesis is more likely correct. So the null hypothesis is the idea that there's no connection between two things. Null hypothesis is there's no connection between smoking cigarettes and cancer. And that becomes the de facto stance until such time as there's evidence that there is a connection between the two. It's how you establish kind of a burden of proof. It is the thing that you are arguing against. And so you could say the null hypothesis is that there's nobody who was alive during the War of 1812 who is alive now. Now, you can't prove that, just as a matter of practical impossibility. But you could demonstrate that it's false by, hey, here's somebody, and we've got all these pictures and documents, their history, and they've survived this. We could at least, hypothetically, demonstrate that there was somebody alive. And just because your ancient book says that people lived to 600, 700, 800, 900 plus years doesn't mean that all of a sudden it's plausible to conclude that somebody who was alive during the War of 1812 is alive now. You've got to come with more than that. So that's the correction. By the way, the debate that I did yesterday was Texas Baptists, or Texas Apologetics did the Unapologetic Conference at Austin Baptist Church. It was great. I had a good time. I met Lee Strobel and Mark Mittenberg and debated Mike Licona. Also Braxton. Sorry, Braxton, I've forgotten your last name, but he gave a talk on apologetics. It was interesting. There was a good opportunity to be standing in a Baptist church and talking to the people who I think perhaps might have a little more to gain from understanding why I don't believe anymore. A number of interesting things happened. The debate's available at Austin Baptist Church. I'm going to be posting my own copy of the debate by probably around the end of March. I'm going to give them a month so that they can direct traffic since they're the ones that paid for all of this. One thing that happened is some people that I had not seen in 30 years, 3 of them, flew down from St. Louis, Missouri, just because these are people who went to church with me, the parents of one of my best friends and another member of the church, who saw in their newsletters about apologetics that I would be debating at this conference. They flew down from St. Louis to attend this conference. It was really nice to see them after 30 years. We didn't get to talk a lot because I had to leave quickly. But one of them got up during the Q&A to essentially say, what happened? We knew you when you were a teenager. You were active in our church. We viewed you as one of the rising potential stars here. We expected great things from you. What happened? How did you get from there to here? And I won't go into it all here, but in the debate or towards the end of the Q&A session, I got to go into it in great detail. And it was clear that he was a little broken up and disturbed, as I would expect people to be. We were around you all this time. We figured you were going to be this great, warrior for Christ, and now the exact opposite has happened. And it's difficult. And it was difficult for me, but I think it was perhaps the best moment from the debate. And it had nothing to do with the debate, but it allowed everybody there to connect, for them to realize, oh yeah, hey, he was actually one of us. This isn't just, I used to be a Southern Baptist and blah, blah, blah. It was really significant, and I'm thrilled that they were there, and it was good to catch up with them briefly after 30 years.
Wow.
There's strange curves that get thrown to me all the time.
It's a trip, man.
Not that we're going to use the show to give everybody my entire schedule all the time, but there's a couple events that I wanted to mention, and that is the weekend of March 18th in Nashville, the Nashville Nuns Convention, NanoCon, is going to be happening. I'll be there to give a keynote, but also a debate workshop that I'm doing with J.T. Eberhard. And at the end of April, the final weekend in April, the 29th, I'll be in Detroit. They sent me a link to a Facebook page, which unfortunately, after we lost the internet, my phone reset and I don't have it right now. But the Detroit Coalition of Reason Michigan Atheists are putting on a convention at the end of April. I will be there to speak for that. You can search around on Facebook and Google and stuff like that.
Very cool.
What have you got?
Nothing, man. I got nothing.
Wow, that must be nice. I got home yesterday, and I'd been basically at this Baptist. I spent more time in a Baptist church this weekend than I have in probably 10 years. Because I'll go to churches on occasion, but it's just like, let me go to a service. Whereas this weekend I was there from 3 o'clock Friday afternoon pretty much till, 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock last night. Or no, It was 5. Anyway, it was fun. It was interesting. I didn't catch fire when I walked in. It did feel a little like old home, but it's like if you came home wearing a really bad haircut and nobody had seen you in a while. That's kind of how it felt. Huh. It's like you walk in and they think they recognize you, but there's what did you do to yourself type of thing.
Aww.
But everybody was really nice. We had a good time. There was one thing, and I don't know if I'll mention this in the rebuttal, but there was one thing that Mike Licona had said during the debate. The debate was on whether or not Jesus rose from the dead. And the short version is, Mike's argument is, there's evidence in reality to suggest that reality includes a supernatural dimension. And so he spent a good bit of his opening talking about ghost stories and apparitions and near-death experiences and what seems to be events that are just couldn't be coincidences and therefore they're answered prayer. Use all that to kind of serve as a foundation for the idea that we're reasonable in concluding that there's a supernatural realm. And then the second part was evidence suggests that Jesus rose from the dead. Now the first part's completely irrelevant. The subject of the debate was his entire second part. And I got examples from people when we were talking about supernatural. Mike said, if a terrorist came in and lopped my head off right here in the middle of this room, and then an hour later I walked out into the green room completely alive with a scar and told you that I had a message for you from somebody who had passed on, and it was about a conversation that only the two of you knew about, would you then believe that this was supernatural? And I said, no. What I would believe is that this actually occurred and that I don't have an explanation for it. If you're going to say that the supernatural is the explanation for this event, you have to be able to define the supernatural, show that it's real. All I know at that point is that I'm willing to accept this happened. I saw you die. You are now back. So I would accept that Mike, in that circumstance, was raised from the dead or rose from the dead. The how behind it is a different story.
Right.
And we don't just get to appeal to the supernatural. And he was just absolutely flummoxed that this wouldn't be enough to convince me of the supernatural. And it turns out that, as far as we can tell, the supernatural is a bucket in which we put all the things we can't explain.
So wait a minute.
Boom, boom, boom.
Was the assumption that you've never heard of people's claims about ghosts? Or, how could you think someone wouldn't have already been aware of these things and they still hold the position that they hold? So to think that reminding them that people tell ghost stories or people say certain things.
I think it was a way of just, let me put in all these things that we don't have explanations for, claim they're supernatural. And then as soon as I've claimed that they're supernatural, now all of a sudden a resurrection seems more plausible because you already accept it.
I get the strategy. What I'm trying to figure out is if they're saying it to you, wouldn't the assumption kind of be that you're not aware of all this stuff already? Because, you're kind of rejecting it. That's why you're there. And so for somebody to say, well, here, let me tell you about this ghost story, and let me tell you about this psychic that I went to see, and let me tell you, and it's like people are telling you all these stories, and it's like, you don't think that I've ever heard of a psychic, or I don't have an idea
what they think, and they're correct, is that I don't have an explanation for those. But they think that they do.
But do they think that not having an explanation is going to convince you that the supernatural is involved when you're sitting there and you already know these stories and you're not convinced? Like, do they think that telling you the stories
again? No, he's not trying to convince me.
But he's using it in the debate.
Yes, because he wants to show the audience that I'm unreasonable, that anybody should accept the supernatural is true based on this, and Matt won't.
But it's almost as though you come into the debate loaded with this and you've never even looked up a skeptical response.
No. Well, the people in the audience. So here's the thing. I don't want to do the whole debate review thing here. Here's the thing. The people sitting in the audience there have never looked up a skeptical response. The people sitting in the audience there, both Sunday night and Friday night and Saturday during the thing, on 2 different occasions, somebody asked people to raise their hand if they'd heard of William Lane Craig. almost no hands went up. This is a church full of people, and they are mentioning the foremost Christian apologist. And I mentioned to a friend of mine who's an apologist who was there, we're living in a bubble. We're assuming the people in the pews don't care about apologists.
Right.
They don't care about apologetics.
Right.
God is clearly real. Jesus is clearly real. Jesus loves them. They're going to heaven. That's it. Why would they care about teleological arguments and ontological arguments and all these? So they don't even know who Craig is. They are more concerned with the evangelical side than the apologetics side. And I just did a video kind of drawing a distinction between the two. So this whole thing was about a disagreement about how
I still wonder, it almost seems though, if you were going to debate someone who's a skeptic, I mean, he's addressing, I understand you've got an audience, but he's addressing you and your arguments. That's the whole point, is the two of you are putting your...
No, he's presenting his best case. He's not addressing my thing.
But I mean, the best case should include, and this is what the skeptics will say, and this is why that's not correct, or this is why I disagree with that. I mean...
Oh, you would think that would come up in
if you were going to debate a person, wouldn't the first thing you would do would be to look up their responses to the things that you think are difficult to respond to? You'd want to see what they said about it.
That's what I do. That's not what apologists do. I mean, because apologists who are familiar with this just say, oh, you're being unreasonable. How could you not? Hey, look, our church needed $7,412. We held a prayer meeting all night, and the next day a check showed up from someone who had started an account years ago, let it accrue, and sent us the check without even knowing we needed it, and that check was for exactly $7,412. How can you not conclude that this is God intervening? And my answer is, I don't believe the story. First of all, you have to present more evidence than just, hey, I know this person, and this is... Because I also know that people... what's the thing? Exaggerate that stories become more impressive. It's a fishtail.
Yeah.
Show me that they needed exactly $7,412, and that the next day a check arrived from somebody who didn't know this, and then now we have, hey, this is an incredible coincidence. Now please demonstrate that it's an impossible occurrence without the invention of the supernatural. But you also have to define supernatural.
Well, and I think sometimes people need to ask themselves, I mean, that's what a coincidence is, right? It's like two events that happen closely in time that are meaningfully connected to the person who's assessing the events, right? I mean, that's what a coincidence is. So, in other words, two events that happen close in time that you don't have a meaningful connection to, like I went to the store today and then 2 hours later I went and got my hair done. Whoa, it's like, how is that even, you wouldn't call it a coincidence because there's no meaningful connection between the two. And it also has to be acausal, right? Like you have to not, so in other words, if you went to the store and you bought a trout because it was on sale at H-E-B, and Beth went to another H-E-B and she bought a trout because she saw it on sale, and you guys come home and you're like, what a coincidence, we both bought trout. I says, no, it's not a coincidence, it was on sale and you both saw it, you like trout. I mean, so a coincidence has to be something where it's like you would not, where you're assuming there's no causal connection, where you see that there's some meaningful connection in your own mind, or that you would think would be reasonable persons, would meaningfully connect the events. And they have to be close enough in time to make it like, oh, this happened and then this happened.
Yeah, this is where we got to...
That's a coincidence. I mean, that's what a coincidence is.
The supernatural is a bucket where you put all the things that you can't explain in, and then you pretend like you've explained them. Because despite, this was a point of contention as well, the supernatural has no explanatory power. We explain things.
No, it doesn't.
We explain the unknown in terms of the known. That's how we gain a better understanding. And the supernatural is just trying to explain a mystery by appealing to a bigger mystery.
Right, right. That's like old stuff for the show.
Yeah.
And
it was new stuff for them. But also, he said, the one thing he said was when he went after methodological naturalism, talking about how, it's a bankrupt position. First of all, it's the foundation of science, and I defended all of this. But he's like, if a comet smashed into the moon and spelled out in letters, I am the Lord your God in Greek and Aramaic and everything, he claimed that scientists, because of methodological naturalism, would be prohibited from even acknowledging that the event occurred. That is not only false. I have a hard time believing somebody with his education isn't aware that this is false. Of course the scientists would be able to acknowledge that this happened. They would then be able to potentially investigate it. And until they found out what the explanation was, the scientists would say, we have no explanation. And it may be that way forever. We have no explanation. But he spun this in a different direction and tried to claim that methodological naturalism is a safe space for skeptics who are triggered by spirituality. And that's when I lost my shit. I sat there as calm as I could, and we addressed, science in a respectful fashion. But he went from this philosophical idea is bankrupt to let me just snark at it in terms of some other things that I think are silly or reject. His complete attitude changed during that sentence or so. And I like Mike. We got along. We both have an interest in magic. I'd be happy to debate him again. But I hope he goes back and watches that debate to see just how snarky and dismissive that particular thing was, when the truth is, all methodological naturalism says is, until such time as we have a demonstration that the supernatural exists and is real and can act in a causal fashion to reality, we cannot be justified in appealing to it as an explanation. That's it. As soon as somebody demonstrates that the supernatural is real, all of a sudden it becomes a possible explanation that gets rolled into scientific methods. We're just not there. We may never be there. That's not the fault of science. That's the fault of the people who are attributing, supernatural causation. We actually have a couple calls on I guess, for this
let's
subject.
do it.